Well, I was back in school again. I remember hearing the old familiar vent of that schoolhouse. And I was on the ugly carpet in that classroom, and I could see the desk, but there weren't as many desks as the other classrooms in this room. What room am I in? Hold on, maybe I can find a light switch. Oh no, I see the risers in the back of the room. This was the music/choir room. And it was taught by the creepiest teacher at this middle school, Mr. Louts. He was weird and just a weird dude. He always just made little girls uncomfortable. He just had a weird way around kids, like almost like he wanted to be too close to kids, you know? He just came on a little strong. Anyway, I knew it was his room because I could also see his name written on the board. And wait a minute, hold on. If I was in the choir room, then that means the band room's not right next to me. And so I opened the door and I was in the band room. Yup. I was a band kid in middle and high school. I was also a band kid in college. I played saxophone for 10 years. Yeah, saxophones, they're the cool kids of the band if you don't know. And I must say, Mr. Louts was also the band director. And yeah, he was a slightly above mediocre band director. He wasn't the best, although I loved my high school band director, Mr. Edwards. I loved him. But then I looked into the band room and I stepped in, and the concert arcs and there was only one overhead light near the chalkboard, and it just had a very eerie feeling to it. And so I walked towards what was my old chair in band, and it was my old stand. And I remember it was my old stand because it was a like black bandstand, and I had taken like the end of a pencil, like the metal end of a pencil, and I carved in the initials GM for George Michael, because yeah, we all of us saxophonists, we all play Careless Whisper, even though that George Michael has way better songs. But that's besides the point. And then I looked at the old familiar chalkboard, and I don't know how I didn't see it before, but I did see it this time. It was the suicide note that Jess had left me. I'm so sorry. I had to do this. Please forgive me. I didn't know what else to do. I still tear up a little bit thinking about it all the time. And I had to get out of that room. I had to get out of there. And so I was in that dark hallway, and then I hear... It was the sound of a rusty metal door opening, and then I noticed the row of blue lockers. And I remembered, wait a minute, that's my old locker. Locker number 41. I remembered locker number 41. It had my old Captain America lunchbox in it. And out of all the lunchboxes I ever had, that one was my favorite of all the lunchboxes. Yeah, and I had it all throughout middle school. And, let's see what else was in my locker. You see, there was a couple of the old Harry Potter books I used to read because in 2002 and 2003, the Harry Potter movies, the first couple of them came out, and I was really into those. And hey, look, there were a couple of my old Spider-Man comics. I used to read those too because in 2002 the OG Spider-Man movie came out, and I was all into that too, and I was I was such a nerd. And hey, look, in my locker I also found some of my old CD player. It was a little purple round CD player with some little black headphones, and yeah, and I found some of my old CDs. Like there was some Rage Against the Machine, because back then Rage Against the Machine was one of my favorite bands ever. There was Renegade by Rage Against the Machine. There was my old Linkin Park CD, and yes, there was also a Nickelback CD, because back in the day I used to love Nickelback. I was 12, okay? And that song was everywhere, okay? And also, there were more, like, there was Freak by George Michael. I used to listen to that song quite a bit. It was a brand new song back in 2002. And also, there was also a couple of Coldplay CDs. I used to love Coldplay. The early stuff, there were Parachutes, A Rush of Blood to the Head. And there was also Kid A by Radiohead. Oh, I used to listen to that stuff all the time. Good memories. But beneath all the CDs was a little piece of paper. And it said, "Meet me in the computer lab." Huh. Okay. You know, I'm in horror movies for a living, so I was hesitant at first. But I'm in school, and, well, there doesn't appear to be anyone else in this dark school, and I didn't like how there was just a stillness in the air to the school. It was like no one had been in there for years. But was St. Sybil's Middle School, was it even still opened in Maine? I don't know, but well, I didn't want to wait out in that hallway anymore, so I walked back to the old computer lab. Do you older kids remember the computer lab? Because back in the day, I remember we had computer class, and the teacher would teach us how to type and on computers and how to work on computers. And I remember if we were good, we were allowed to play some computer games. And I remember I used to play some computer games. I used to play Oregon Trail. I also used to play Doom. And when the internet wasn't on, I also used to play the dinosaur game. I got pretty good at the dinosaur game. But I walked in to the computer lab. It was right next to the library, and there were these big long tables full of the old computers with the big screens and the computer towers and the keyboards that were plugged in. Nothing like the laptop I have now. And there were some pretty big computer monitors. And then it was just about pitch black in that computer lab. But then I see, and then a blue light appeared. And I knew it was from one of the computers, but wait a minute. This computer was on the second table in the room, and it was close to the end of the table, of the long round table. And wait a minute, that's the computer chair I always sat in. And so I looked in, and there was an old picture of that generic field, if you remember those, if you're old enough to remember that grassy meadow that they used to have on computers like 15, 20 years ago, if you're old enough to remember that. And then there was a big white box appeared at the bottom of the computer, and it said, "You have one new message." And I opened it up, and it said, "Ethan, it's me. Behind you." And I was like, oh no, I'm about to get killed. And so I looked behind me, and then there was no one there. And then, right behind me and adjacent to me, another computer lit up. And I looked over, and I moved the mouse around a little bit, and then it went to black. And then white letters came up spelling, "It's me, Ethan. Help me, Ethan." Yeah, it didn't take a detective to figure out who was talking to me now. And I just said, "Jessica, are you there?" And then, beep, 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 beep. All the computers, that they started turning off and turning on and turning off and turning on. And it felt like a modernist tech symphony from hell. And all I could do was just close my ears, and I ran out. I ran out practically screaming into the hallway. And then I heard the metal creak again. But this time, it wasn't at locker number 41. It was at locker number 52. And that was my friend Lynn. I was in band. I had another friend in middle school named Lynn. And she played flute, and she also played percussion in high school, but you don't need to know this, but me, Lynn, and Jessica, we were real tight back in middle school. And her locker opened, and I instinctually went in, and another piece of paper fell out of there, and I picked it up, and this time it was written in red crayon, and it said, "Lynn, I need your help. Please, meet me in the bathroom." And then I remembered, I think the bathrooms are on the end of the hall. So, well, I figured I was trapped in this school anyway. It was like my own personal purgatory, so mine as well. And then I saw a light from the women's room flicker on. And I thought, well, no one's here, so I can go in the women's room if I want. And I must say, for all the talk that there was in the women's room, it's really not that much different. Only no urinals. But speaking of that, I saw the stalls at the end. And the stall at the end of the bathroom, it was like the door was moving, and then I heard it rattling like, and then it started like coming open and closed, open and closed, open and closed, over and over and over again. And then the light started flickering. And I started breathing real heavy. And then I stopped. And I felt a cold rush of air behind me. It was as if someone was breathing down my neck. And I thought, Ethan, whoever's behind you, you can kick their ass. So, okay. All right, I'm gonna look. I'm gonna look. And who was behind me? Whoever was behind me made me stop dead in my tracks, because I was looking right at the dark, thin, parted in the middle haircut, and the pale white skin, and the dark eyes, and the white button-up shirt, and the black tie that he always wore, and the black jeans and the loafers. He was standing right in front of me. Mr. Louts. He was just as scary then as I knew him back in middle school. And then, in an instant, he was gone. I couldn't tell you why I did it, but I felt the need to go to his office. I still remembered where it was, even after all those years. It had been almost 15 years since I had left that school, but I still remembered where it was. And then I stepped in, and you see, he also taught math, you see, which is why there were lots of numbers and formula posters on his office wall. And then I looked. Beside his rolly chair, his computer monitor flashed on in that old, sickly blue light. And I knew I had to check. And then I noticed that whoever was typing up, Mr. Louts evidently, had just finished typing up an email, and it said, "Dear Miss Watkins, I have noticed that little Jessica has been going through a hard time with the death of her mother and her father having a big personality, in air quotes. And she has also been having feminine issues, and I just want to clarify to you and the school board that I feel the need to counsel her through all this. And since I care for her, much like I do all my students, that is why I will sometimes have her in my office one-on-one." Yep. Why did I not see this before? This guy was a fucking predator. Why did I not see it before? Why did I not see it before? And I looked up, and in the shadow of the doorway was Mr. Louts again. But this time he appeared to be a lot taller. And he said, "You're not supposed to be in there, Ethan. Come on, let's make this right." And he hurled towards me, and then I hear a "Rah!" And then in an instant I am awoke, and I'm surrounded by brown walls and a strange white light bulb. And then I am thrown down onto what appears to be like brown porch steps. And then I realize I'm outside. And so evidently I'm being pushed. So I grab the stairs in an attempt to get up. And then, whew, my back has been struck. And I fall back down. And I hear that horrifying voice of that chalky, thin woman that I had met before, saying, You answer to God. God, give me voice. God, guide my hand. You will answer to God. And then I realized that she had me in her pickaxe, and then she had her pickaxe dug right in my shoulder blades, and then she started to pull, and she pulled me off those stairs and through the dirt. And I realized I was on some sort of like walking path, like almost like a street with no cars. And then through the side of my eye, I could see, oh, she's taking me to the church. She's gonna put me with Mia. Alright, okay, but I can't let her hurt me anymore. Okay, so with my strength, with my enhanced strength, I grab onto the ground and I hold, and then I feel the axe dig in my blades again. And then I grab the handle that was right above my head from the pickaxe, and I grabbed it and I started to squeeze, and then she took her sandal foot and kicked me right in the face. And then I fell face down, and she dragged me some more. But this time, once again, I planted my left hand into the ground as hard as I could with my enhanced strength. And then I grabbed the handle again. And then when she went to kick me, I quickly took out my left hand and grabbed her foot and then flipped her over. I pulled her right on her back, and she fell right on her skinny, bony ass. And I squeezed that handle of that pickaxe as hard as I could, and eventually it snapped. And then with all the strength I had, I pulled that pickaxe deep out of my back, and then I felt the blood come out. But I felt my back contracting, and I knew my healing factor was going to be with me that night. Sometimes I owe Dr. Eugenic a great deal of thanks. And then she said, You will be sent to hell. God, give me voice. God, guide my hand. And so I grabbed the end of the pickaxe, and then I thrust it right into the leg that she tried to kick me while I'm down. And then grabbing her leg, I hoisted myself up, and I could feel the hole in my back getting smaller and smaller. And then I pulled out that pickaxe again, and then I thrust it right into her stomach. And then I brought my arm back and then smashed it right into her rib cage, through her sternum, and it evidently went into her beating heart. And I heard her gargle. And she fell back. And she was no more. And then I felt myself get up, and I felt the spot where she had hit me, and it was a swollen over bruise now. Alright, this is where I find Mia. And then out of nowhere, I hear a gunshot, and then behind me, I hear, Ethan, where have you been? Where'd you go? And I was confused, and I remembered they were the STARS agents. And they said, what? And they said, Ethan, we tried to help you, but as soon as we landed, like, there was this, like, wave, and then you just walked off. And you talked about, like, we tried to chase you, but you kept talking about some girl named Jessica and a man named Mr. Louts. What's going on? How do you know Mr. Louts? And I said, he was my old pervy middle school teacher. And they said, well, that's weird, because That's the leader of this cult. That's his name, Anthony Louts.